my name is Sharon Allen and I'm the Chief Executive of Skills for Care, and I'm chairing this session this morning. I'm going to be very, very good about timing. I've been told we've got an extra 10 minutes to try and catch up with Kirsten's conference time. So we'll finish at 22 and we will finish at 22. So when we get to the question time, if you'd be ready and quick with your hands and even quick with your questions, please make sure they are questions, not monologues, which quite often happens at things like this. So I'm going to introduce our esteemed panel to you, and I am really looking forward to what our colleagues are going to say to us. I'm not going to do bios of them because we're running short of time, and you can Google them, like hide find out who they all are. And I'm sure they'll tell you more about themselves anyway as they introduce their sessions. So we're going to be hearing from Kate Pickett, who's already been referenced this morning, and Kate is one of the co-authors of The Spirit Level. I hope you've all read that book, and if you haven't, I recommend it strongly to you. We're also going to hear from Ruth Moore, who is Director of the Living Wage Foundation, from Sophie Jewett, who I had the pleasure of meeting last evening, and Sophie is a social entrepreneur here in York and will tell you more about her experiences, and from Sue Cook, who is from the Leeds City Region Local Enterprise Partnership. You might be wondering why I am here as the Chief Executive of Skills for Care, chairing this session for you. Well, partly it's because Kirsten England and I know each other very well and we go back a long way. But I think it's also because social care, which has been referenced again this morning, is a sector that's often talked about as being a low-skilled, low-paid sector. Can I just do something here and reduce that conflation or eliminate that conflation? It is not a low-skilled sector. It is a sector that employs 1.5 million people, supporting thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, some of whom may be your family members or even indeed yourselves, providing very highly skilled care and support. Sorry, can you just get this stopped? Somebody read all my things, can I do that? Thank you. Sorry, no. I didn't realise that was going on behind me. Thank you. I'm not going to be distracted by that, thank you. Thank you, no thank you. But it is a sector that has challenges around pay, and I'm sure we're going to hear some things about the minimum wage, the living wage from our speakers. One of the things we know in social care is that by 2025 we're going to need an additional 1 million workers because of the demographic changes. Julia talked about the fact that we're living longer, and that's a cause for celebration. It does mean more of us are going to be needing some kind of care and support in our lives, therefore more people needed in our sector. Let's make this really personal, if it's not personal already for you. By 2051 there are going to be 1.7 million people in this country living with dementia. By 2051, I'm going to be 90. Shock, she can't be that old. I will be 90. It shocked me when I worked that out. So I might be one of those people living with dementia or living with some other kind of condition where I need care and support. What would I want that to look like? Well, I will want it to be good, and I will want the people providing that care and support to be people who are valued in that full sense of the word. Kirsten's already made reference to Christine Lagarde's presentation, speech at the Richard Dimbleby lecture, and she pulled out some of the points that I was going to make, so I'm not going to repeat them, but again, do commend that speech to you if you haven't read it. I think it's very interesting. A couple of other reports I just wanted to flag to you, which colleagues may also be going to do. The Low Pay Commission's most recent report talked about social care as one of the sectors where we have challenges around low pay, along with other sectors that won't be a surprise to you: cleaning, hairdressing, retail and hospitality. The difference, I think, is that social care has the lower proportion of people in minimum wage jobs, which is not to say that's a good thing, but it's a very high labour intensive market. It's a people business. And the last reference I just want to make before I introduce our speakers is to Will Hutton's article in The Guardian this weekend, where he reports on what's happened in Seattle and the introduction of a higher minimum wage, moving the minimum wage up to $15. And the arguments about whether minimum wage, living wage is actually a contributor or a detractor to economic growth is something I'm sure our speakers are going to touch on this morning. So I'll just leave you with that thought and ask our first speaker, who is Kate, to come up and address you. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for making those very, very important points. A lot of what I had planned to say to you, I feel has already been covered in the opening session by the Archbishop, by Julia and by Hugh. This is a bit distracting too, isn't it? Sort of in a way, but it's just in the way that people. Can it actually be moved? No, it can't. It's stuck down there. So, that's better. Thank you very much. A really important thing about getting a degree at this university is that you can work with technology. If you can't, you don't deserve it. And actually, I was also going to talk about the Seattle initiative on the living wage, and I also urge you to read that article by Will Hutton. Seattle has said that locally, employers must pay a living wage to their employees of $15 an hour. That's over £8 an hour. So actually, it's closer to our London living wage than our living wage in the rest of the nation. It's a very bold move. And it's come about because of grassroots campaigning. It's come about because people working in fast food industries, an extremely low-paid sector, have really got out on the streets and campaigned. And actually, it's changed who's being elected into local government. And that has changed the things that local government can do. So the role of advocacy and campaigning is so important in this. You know, our local governments and our national governments are not going to hand us things on a plate. They have to be asked. They have to be agitated, and they have to be provoked, and they have to be prodded. My co-author, Richard, often says that he feels that business has two functions. It has come to have two functions. One is that it provides the goods and the services that we all need. And the other is that it concentrates wealth. To those that have is given more. It concentrates wealth at the top. And that we need business to continue providing us with that first function, but to stop doing the second. That has no purpose in building community. It has no purpose in creating stable societies. To concentrate wealth among a few is dysfunctional. It's not a healthy state to be in. And if we think about the value of people's contributions in life, we shouldn't be looking at them in terms of their pay or in terms of their social status. We should be thinking about the value of what people provide in their communities. Sharon made the point about care workers. We may all need to be cared for at various times in our lives. Children need to be cared for. Things need to be cleaned. Rubbish needs to be taken away. You know, work needs to be done in all sorts of ways to keep our societies rolling along. And Warren Buffett, one of the richest men in the world, admitted that his wealth has come about on the backs of the contributions of lots of other people. You don't make money in this world if the electricity doesn't work, or if there aren't roads to transport your goods around, or if research isn't being done in publicly funded universities to create the innovation. Wealth creation is actually a cooperative business. Wealth distribution should be as well. The New Economics Foundation did a very nice piece of work a few years ago where they actually tried to calculate the social value of different kinds of employment. They looked at bankers, very high earners, they looked at nurses, and they looked at care assistants. And they found that the value they provided was, directly disproportional to their incomes. And that's wrong. It's unjust. But we need to think about practicalities too. So that what I want to finish up with is to introduce you to an idea that we have recently been introduced to that's happening in Preston. And what they are doing is trying to create wealth in their community in very, very practical terms. They've identified what they call a number of anchor institutions in their community. So that includes things like the local colleges, the council, and the larger, more established businesses in the area. And they are asking them to procure services and do their business locally. And if they cannot find a local provider for the things they need, then Preston is also helping citizens in its community to set up businesses to provide those needs and set them up as cooperatives. And cooperatives change a company from being sort of its property to a community, because everybody's invested, everybody's equal. And they're helping the employees buy out their companies when opportunities for a change of ownership come up. So those three ways, by asking the anchor institutions to work locally, to buy locally, to invest locally, helping cooperatives be set up in the community, and helping employee buyouts, they're hoping to transform the way in which business is done in their community and the lives of people involved in those businesses that provide the services or resources to the anchor institutions. So it seems to me very practical and very doable, but also quite radical. And for that radical change to happen, you do need that local leadership. But the local leadership might not think about doing this unless people are asking them to do it and demanding that kind of change. So I think what we need to be doing is all looking very carefully at exemplars from other community, examples where people have come up with practical solutions that make change and that are directly involved in saying that the proceeds of growth should be shared fairly, that the concentration of wealth is not okay, and that growth is meaningless unless it is distributed properly to benefit all of those who contribute to it in all the different ways they do. Thanks.
Okay, please, you're next.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning everybody, I'm Rhys Moore, I'm Director of the Living Wage Foundation. We're a charity that campaigns and encourages employers to voluntarily sign up to pay the living wage rather than the minimum wage. The subject this morning is good growth. And on the train on the way up here, as yesterday, it was very sunny. It's still beautiful out there, and I was feeling quite rosy and optimistic. So I'm going to try and share with you two reasons I'm quite optimistic that we might see in this recovery what we could call good growth. But first of all, I thought I'd have a go at defining what good growth means to me. And I think what I've settled on is this. Will this recovery disproportionately benefit those on the lowest incomes? So will the growth that we see go more to those on low incomes than to any other group? So we're not just talking about growth sort of generally being shared out, it's actually got to go more to those who are on lowest incomes. And if we meet that test, then I'd say that we've seen a good recovery. So that test in mind, why am I cautiously optimistic? Two reasons, one political and one relating to the private sector, who are obviously key to any good growth that we might see. So I'll start with the politics. I think there's remarkable political consensus currently that there is a problem with wages. And you can see this in all three parties. In fact, you see it even in UKIP. Their one social policy at the moment, you may have seen, is to remove those on minimum wage out of tax, which is a very positive move, I would suggest. But amongst the three main parties, they all recognise that those on low incomes have suffered during the recession, and that as we come out of the slump, that something needs to be done, and they have different approaches and different policies on this. I pick out one example, which was George Osborne's extraordinary, really, intervention on the minimum wage just before the Low Pay Commission were to make their recommendation on the minimum wage, with the Chancellor of the Exchequer sort of goading, in a way, the Low Pay Commission to do better and to be a bit more radical. And he used the figure of £7 an hour. Now, we can debate the sort of politics behind that, but nonetheless, an unusual and interesting observation from a Conservative Chancellor. So I'd say that the politics for this is ripe for people who are interested in issues of growth. We've got a 12-month, just under 12-month window now. We actually know when the next general election is taking place, which is a new thing. And I think if we campaign and agitate, then there's an opportunity to take advantage of that political consensus. Second reason for optimism is the private sector's attitude to low wages and income. The Living Wage campaign itself has seen some real successes in the last few years. When we launched the Living Wage Foundation in 2011, we had around about 50 employers in London at that point, just in London, who'd signed up to pay the living wage. We're now up to 750 employers, and within that number, there are some very chunky private sector employers. We're approaching 15 members of the FTSE 100 who've signed up, and they're signing up for a reason, because they want to position themselves as being good employers, as being part of the community, and as going a company that will go further than what is legally required of them on pay. So I pick out the Living Wage campaign as an example of the private sector doing right on this issue. But I'd also pick out, looking beyond the Living Wage campaign, the comments that John Cridland, the Director General of the CBI, made at the start of this year. So John Cridland every year makes a New Year's address, and this year he chose to talk about wages, and he chose to talk about the responsibility on his members of the CBI, to act on wages as the recovery picks up. So that's an example of really the embodiment of the private sector in the UK, the Director General of the CBI, saying to his membership, we need to do something on this. So I'm optimistic because I think the politics is ripe, and I'm optimistic because I think there are sympathetic figures within the private sector, senior figures who recognise they have a responsibility to act. I'll end on a note of caution, which is that none of this, of course, is inevitable, and I completely echo Kate's points that whilst the ground may be fertile, we've got 12 months, I think, to campaign and to agitate to actually see some impact made. The Living Wage campaign is going to do that by focusing on two areas that we think we can make progress on. Social care, the good social care sector is one. It is a disgrace that people who are doing some of the most difficult, challenging work are the lowest paid in our economy. So we have a campaign focused on social care. And the second area is retail, where to date we've made very little progress. And we are focusing our energies on the big supermarkets, who we think can do better than they're currently doing. I'll finish there. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Rhys. Sophie, can I ask you to share your thoughts with us?
Rightio, so good morning. My name's Sophie Jewett. I am a business owner in York, so hopefully when you say the word business it doesn't come with negative connotations today. There were two things that I wanted to talk about, but there's just going to be one that I really want to focus on. One of the things that I would love to talk about today are some of the challenges of being a fair employer in the city and reconciling the demands of growth and everything else that we're talking about today. I kind of came into the philosophy of having a business of, am I utilitarian or do I go for social values? And the challenges of having a business and reconciling the two of those have been something that I've had to certainly look deep inside my conscience and understand in the decision-making process of having a business and making sure it can go through and survive some of the hardest economic climate. That's not what I really want to talk about today, because I think that is the decision-making process that comes at the end of a bigger scene and a bigger picture. So what I wanted to really talk about was the fairness of opportunity. And I'm delighted to be surrounded today, and I saw so many people coming through that I've worked with in this city in the 15 years that I've since arrived here to study politics, philosophy and economics at this university. So I have a real affection for York and I have a real affection for the university here. Since I've arrived here and just seeing today, I have seen so many of my own personal role models in this room. Former Lord Mayors that I have worked with that have taken my products and spread the word of my business around the globe for me. Former employers, former employees, former clients, continued clients, I hope. And I think it's in discussing this weekend with one of my students who works with me at the moment, she said that I have a high social capital. And it's really quite interesting to start evaluating what that meant. And I realised that in actual fact it's because of that social capital that I've been able to have the business that I have today. Now I started York Cocoa House 2.5 years ago. We're coming up to our 3rd birthday now, and I always feel like a proud toddler when I explain how many months we've been in business. But I've been in business 6 years ago, and you can't help but have a chocolate business in the city and be influenced by the greater social context of Rowntree's and everything that they stood for. So I'm not surprised that this social network that York has created has led to an exceptional number of businesses being started up by entrepreneurs willing to give it a go in this city. We have one of the highest start-up rates of any others within the region. So when I sit on the Leeds City Region Economic Board for Growth and Business and Innovation, I'm really proud to be an entrepreneur from York because there's so many in this city that are there giving it a go. However, we have different values that maybe underpin the reasons why we're in business. And for that reason, not many are actually graduating to that level of contributing to VAT or the VAT threshold. And there's some really core concerns that what is happening, what is stopping people from going to that level. And I think it's one of the reasons is that people in York do things differently, and we value things differently. I'm a very avid Twitterer, and I saw on Ariana Huffington's post, she posted something recently, and it's something that really kind of underpins something that I hold very dear. She said, I needed to find a better reason to go on living than he who dies with the most toys wins. And I find that really, really important, because if you have a high social capital, you're there talking to other people. You're valuing all the things that people can give you, and you're wanting to contribute back into society. However, I can tell you that the bank really don't value a high social capital. They're not going to give you a loan based on a high social capital or potential to do something. They're not going to give you money or value what you can contribute to society. It's just not what they use in their decision-making mechanisms. And so we have this dichotomy of the decision-making process that goes on in our country and what underpins what is happening and the growth opportunities that businesses can really embrace, because they are interested in assets. They're interested in toys. They're interested in money. That is the decision-making process. And so an entrepreneur or a business owner in our city today making a decision-making process or engaging in a decision-making process has to look at the bottom line. And that really puts us in this decision of how do we assess the right way forward. I, as many other entrepreneurs, when we ever discuss how we have got on in business or how we have got to where we've got to, we say we're lucky. And it's something that if ever I meet other business owners, we all say we're really lucky, we had a really lucky break. And I can look around the room, and I've looked around the lecture earlier this morning, and I saw so many people that gave me that lucky break. it's something that I have to tell myself, and I bring up every other entrepreneur. We are not lucky. There are many things in my life I feel lucky for, but we are not lucky. We went out and we worked hard to make every opportunity happen. There's only so much that we can make opportunities put in front of people, but we went out and embraced those. However, I do still feel extraordinarily lucky. If I had started my business now, I would not have a business. When I started my business, I went to the bank manager and he said, well, you've got a good track record in business, you've got a good credit rating. What else have you got going on in your life? And there were 2 boxes that I had to tick, and it was whether I was a homeowner and whether I was married. And at the time when I took out that business loan, I was both of those things. My husband owned our house and I was married, and that got me my business loan. If I went for that today, I would not be in business. And that is the freedom of opportunity. And what is it that we have in front of us for us to be able to embrace these opportunities? And that's why I feel really, really strongly about the opportunities that we have in front of us and how we can create a culture that allows people to embrace that entrepreneurial spirit, to create cooperatives, as Kate has said, identify opportunities for business, and to cycle that wealth around our economy. So we have this massive dichotomy of values that underpin the decision-making process. And until we can really start to undermine those and bring social value and social worth to actually mean something and the contribution that entrepreneurs can make, then it's something that we're always going to hit a brick wall. I feel very privileged to sit on the Leeds City Region panel for Enterprise, Innovation, Growth and Business. I sit on the CBI Enterprise panel and recently discussed business growth and opportunities with Lord Young in London. I continue to sit in meetings around the city and around the region, and I'm young and I'm female and I tend to stick out like a sore thumb. There is never a queue at the toilets. I get to sit in meetings where what is valued are watches, holidays, clothing, cars. Still, we're talking about he who has the most toys wins. He who has the most toys are in the position to make the decisions. And those people that don't have toys to bring to the party, you're getting left out. So I do stand up and I tend to be the annoying one that says, well, what about this? What about the entrepreneurs and small to medium-sized business owners who employ a third of the population? How do we reconcile wanting to pay the living wage to our employees, probably more than we ever get paid ourselves? How do we reconcile that with the rest of the environment that we are forced to try and navigate through? I don't have the answers to that, but I know that when Nestle bought Rowntree's, they bought it based on perception and value. Kit Kat went on to be the world's most influential chocolate bar, all created from Europe. That was based on a hunch, that was based on a belief, that was based on the value of what that company had created. And the moment that we have to start making our decisions based on the bottom line and the accountants take over, historically we can look at the journey of every major business in this country and we see the point in which their downfall started. At the point where those families, where those people that are really connected with the decision-making process and looking their employees, looking their suppliers, looking their creditors and debtors in the face, is eliminated from the decision-making process. That's the point where we see our larger organisations starting to fail. For me, I see a really buoyant economy moving forward, and one that I really sort of have hope in. If I didn't, I would give up, because starting a business and sustaining a business is not an easy one. So I really believe that things are turning a corner. But I think it's most important for us to understand how that decision-making process can come about and how the person with not necessarily the most toys can have an opportunity to be involved. I'm going to reiterate some of the points that both Kate and Reece have mentioned today, and talking about sort of supply chain. If we're talking about where our money goes, where our procurement has an opportunity to make the most influence, we need to be talking about those small to medium-sized enterprises and businesses. those individuals that are very connected within their local communities, that cycle that money and that finance back around their local community. It's in procurement, it's in identifying who you're buying from, why you're buying from it. I know that my suppliers, I know that my customers all value that decision-making process that us as a business try hard to endeavour. However, it is continually at odds with the rest of the decision-making process in this country. That is the scenery in which we're all navigating a way around. And I hope that more business owners can be involved in this communication and conversation moving forward, because as business owners, I have to say, a third of us, all directly employing people, are not necessarily the business that doesn't want to employ at the living wage. But thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Sophie. And our final speaker, Sue. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm here to represent the Leeds City Region Enterprise Partnership. So I thought I'd better just start with checking whether that sort of resonates to this audience. So first of all, I thought I'd better explain or just check if you know about the Leeds City Region area. So I wanted to say that, there's some nods already, because York is very much a part of that, as are 10 local authorities, covering West Yorkshire and down as far as Barnsley, out to Bradford, and quite a lot of North Yorkshire that sits around the top of Leeds as well. So it's a pretty big area. There's 3 million people, about 1.5 million people in work, and in terms of SMEs, which Sophie mentioned, over 106,000 businesses in our area. So it's a big economic space with lots of things going for it. Now, the LEP itself, Local Enterprise Partnership, you might be thinking, well, okay, I can understand that's about growth, because very much the raison d'etre of the LEP is about growth, and it's charged with boosting and enhancing economic growth for our area. But what about good growth, which is the debate for today? So I've been thinking about this in terms of trying to sort of trace through what is our involvement in this. And I think, for me, it starts with the people who are on that LEP. So, obviously you've met Sophie already. Sophie's one of our business members on our Business Innovation and Growth panel. But also, if you think about our main board, the Local Enterprise Partnership Board itself, that is a finely balanced group of 8 local authority leaders. So Councillor James Alexander downstairs is one of those, and as are 7 other leaders of local authorities around our state, our area. We've also got 9 business leaders, including, and I thought this was worth pointing out in the context of this debate, the University Vice-Chancellor from Huddersfield, and also a social entrepreneur from Leeds. So it's not just what you would consider, if you like, pure corporate business that's involved. It's a mixture of SMEs and social enterprise, third sector, as well as the classic constituency there. So I thought, having said that in terms of our makeup, it was important to show that the members of the LEP do have an interest in what you would call here today good growth. They don't always necessarily use the same language as has been used in terms of fairness and poverty. I think those are words that don't always crop up day to day in terms of the language of the LEP. However, the idea of social involvement, community benefit, not just GVA and GDP growth for its own sake, but how that translates into jobs and how we tackle some of the big challenges that we mentioned already, like youth unemployment, are certainly very much on the LEP agenda. So I'm going to sort of talk about those in a minute. So I thought it was worth flashing up, as I look at the prop here, a document that we have literally just signed off in the last month or so. This is the strategic economic plan that has been agreed for the Leeds City region and submitted to government. It's a medium to long-term plan, and its goals, yes, they are about gross value added and economic growth in its pure sense, but there is also a lot in here around jobs and skills and how we get involved in that debate that was mentioned by Julia earlier about better jobs and more jobs that the Joseph Rowntree Foundation is engaged in. So that is recently become part of our work. We've joined that partnership, and so that will be taking us into the debate about good growth much more deeply. But just to sort of suggest what is in here, all the things you would expect in terms of classic economic development are in here: transport, housing. There's also quite a bit about low carbon, resource efficiency, so the kind of hard end of economic development in terms of those kinds of investments. But the areas that I wanted to concentrate on today are around business growth, which is obviously around for us, particularly SMEs and entrepreneurs, generating wealth for the area. And we do a lot through the panel that Sophie's a member of to try and secure more resources for that, particularly around boosting export and around innovation. But also one of our projects that we've had going for a couple of years now is around jobs creation and jobs growth. So we have persuaded the government to allow £25 million of their regional growth fund to be invested in SMEs in our area. We've invested 15 million of that so far. That has led to the creation of 2,000 jobs. So we believe that there is a very direct role that we can play in investing that kind of resource locally for the benefit of local people. Secondly, around employment and skills, which is one of the big pillars of this plan, we have recognised, and our leaders recognised a couple of years ago, that one of the big challenges of our day was the one that the Archbishop referred to earlier, about young people, and particularly those that are deemed to be needs, so not in employment, education or training. And at the peak of the recession, the number of 18 to 24-year-old needs that we had in the Leeds City region was 28,000. So that's a pretty high figure. And what is pleasing to note is that that is now down to 18,000. Now, it's still not good enough, and there's a long way to go to become need-free, which is our ambition, but it's come down, a fair bit. Some of that clearly will be within the direction of growth in the economy, some factors beyond our control. But also, I think it's fair to say that the LEP has grasped that challenge, has invested in apprenticeships, persuading more SMEs to take on apprenticeships. It's invested with government in getting 18 to 24s back into the workforce. It's invested in something called the Devolved Youth Contract, proving to government that if you provide resources locally on a flexible basis, they can be more effective than big national contracts that governments often sort of give out and then don't always reach the places they need to reach. So working with local authorities in our area, we have been able to target some of that money and gain a much better conversion rate from NEET into employment, educational training. So we're very pleased about that, and we think it's building the argument to government, which is evident in this plan, that we would like to see more devolution and more resources available locally to be invested with the guidance of our local politicians and our local business people, as you've heard from the structure of our board. So just finally, just touching back on the Joseph Rowntree Foundation project that you heard about earlier, that Judy talked about, the More Jobs, Better Jobs. That is bringing us into taking debates beyond just about jobs, and I think everybody's recognising that now, that just solving, let's say, the unemployment crisis, if only we could, but just doing that and getting people into jobs on its own is not enough, because as we've heard, there are still more people, more families in poverty where people have got a job than who haven't. So just getting a job on its own is not the answer. We need to have, yes, more jobs, but this concept of better jobs. So we've just started working with Joseph Rowntree and with other partners across the city region to engage in that, find out where are the gaps then, what is it that's needed. It's a tricky, it's not a straightforward sort of problem and answer on this one. It's not just about wage levels, which we're hearing a lot about today. It's also about poverty in the context of the family and what its outgoings are. And so how can we translate economic policy and actions that we've been talking about in our plan into actually having an impact on poverty. So we think some of that is about progression and how people move from a lower paid job into higher levels, and how do they bridge that big divide in the middle of the labour market where we're losing a lot of jobs, and how do they get higher up. So we've got one final point. We have got access to European funding over the next 7 years, and that is our opportunity to steer some of that towards some of those challenges. So I look forward to hearing from you all today in terms of the debate about where some of the keys are for unlocking some of that potential. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue, and thank you to all of the panellists for sharing their thoughts. I hope that's really stimulated you now, because what we want to do is have an engaged session. We've got 15 minutes for a debate. And I really encourage you to have a debate together. Please obviously ask questions of the panel, but have a conversation and ask questions of each other. So if you would just stick your hand up, say who you are and ask a short pithy question, we'll get the conversation going. Who's going to go first? Yes, take it back.
I'm worried about all this business lark. If we're saying that cooperation is the keynote for a more egalitarian society, and so we reduce the income gap between rich and poor, shouldn't the LEP be inviting somebody from Preston, for example, to come and speak passionately about the cooperative way of doing things?
Okay, did we have another question? Jenny? I'm going to take a couple together.
Yeah, it's a question linked to the Preston example. I wondered whether they can give us any ideas as to how local action can actually have any effect at all in a national context where national policy is pulling in completely the opposite direction, with a government that's completely unabashed about wealth being accumulated at the top. And as Sophie said, banks were totally uninterested in social value. But there's anything we can learn from them, either by joining up or some additional strand to it that we could add here in York to address that.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. And
Andy Agard. Just on this thing about keeping the money in the local economy, I just wonder whether the example of Bristol, where they established a local currency, is an approach that you would advocate as a way of actually encouraging local procurement and keep it from building that local sustainability.
okay, there's lots of other hands going up, but if I can ask Sue to start the panel responses. So what can we learn from elsewhere and what are we doing to harness?
Well, I can't comment on the Bretton example because it's the first about it to raise, but the Joseph Rowntree project, which is very much about learning from elsewhere, although it's using its focus on the Leeds City region for its casework to sort of test out some things, is definitely about bringing things from elsewhere. So we're looking forward, it's a 4-year project, to finding out through that about what has worked, to understand about the anchor, in fact anchor institutions are one of the strands of work in that project. So I think the Joseph Rowntree people have commissioned a study to work with some of the anchor institutions in the City region to talk to them. So I'm sure they'll be teasing out what's worked elsewhere and be very keen to hear about it.
Okay, but just picking up Jen's point, is the LEP in a position to try and influence local practice from lending institutions and banks?
Yes, we've got a few banks who are sort of active in the LEP panels, so and I know our chair has been keen to get them together to try and, if you like, persuade them to take a more active role in terms of releasing some of their lending, particularly for SMEs. So yes, you know that those conversations are going on formally in the LEP discussion, and as you bring people from the public sector closer with the private sector, it just improves the general conversations going on about what the issues are on both sides, what other ones might be a divide.
Thank you. I'm not going to ask the other panel members to comment on that. You can pick it up in the next one.
Can I comment on the Preston initiative though, because we do ask them specifically about that. I mean, they didn't make that up themselves. They got the idea from Cleveland, Ohio, who set it up with support from the University of Maryland, and they set it up based on inspiration from the Mondragon cooperatives in Spain. So you can always look across the world and find out it is. And I would just mention as an alternative to banks, thinking about strengthening credit unions and credit unions in the way in which you can alternatively support businesses and keep finance in the community.
Thank you. I'm going to take 3 more questions. A lady here, there's somebody over, yes, you, and then you.
Yes, I'm a practitioner at heart myself, and I was just wondering, we have so many conferences like these, which are great, don't get me wrong, but I was wondering whether we couldn't better use some money to actually commission studies beyond the Leeds City region to establish good practice, Preston, wherever. And if we did that collectively, we could probably get a decent budget together and proper framework. And rather than everybody knowing a little bit about, not much, we all know a lot more about a lot.
Okay. Would you be willing to get involved in something like that? Okay, so people who are interested in that, see Gwen. Okay.
I was just thinking about what you were talking about, agitation and influence, and can we make a difference in a small local area? And I was just thinking of the example of fair trade as something that people disregarded and poo-pooed and said it'll never make a difference, and now it's fundamentally affected the decision making of the large supermarkets, etc., because we as general people said actually we do care and it will make a difference. So what would happen if we had a living wage badge, and of those 2,000 jobs, how many were created that were a living wage, and of those NEETs out, how many have been given a full-time living wage job? Just as a question.
Yeah, okay, thank you for the question.
My name is Bethan Vincent, I'm from Bright Ethics, and I actually graduated from this university last year for doing a BA, and I would say one of the problems we have in York isn't necessarily a wage issue, it's a retention of graduates. We're hemorrhaging people down to London and we're losing valuable skills and valuable people from this area. I mean, pretty much 90% of my friends have gone to London, and what does that say? So I think that's another really important issue we need to be aware of.
Okay, so three big issues there. Please, do you want to pick up first?
Yeah, I think the Fair Trade example is excellent, and in fact we went to Fair Trade Foundation when we were looking to set up the Living Wage Foundation, and they gave us lots of helpful advice. And I should say there is a living wage badge. It's very handsome, and you'll find it, I hope, increasingly across York, because the City Council is now an accredited living wage employer. They have a plaque in their reception. Viva has started sending out notes on it, so when you get a pension statement from Aviva now, it says we are a living wage employer at the top. And I think there's absolutely an opportunity, particularly in retail, to change behaviour in retail, as Fair Trade did. You know, the Fair Trade mark was only launched 12 years ago, and now it's recognised by, I think, everybody, and it has changed behaviour beyond just the Fair Trade campaign. It's made even sort of non-officially Fair Trade producers change their behaviours. So we hope to do something similar.
Okay, thank you very much. Sophie, did you want to comment on the issues that you came here as a graduate? You stayed. Why did you stay? What do you think we can do to keep more people in the local economy?
I mean, my story about me staying was probably less exciting. I was one of those that wanted to go to London, and I wanted to be in the Foreign Office, and I wanted to go off and travel the world. And I couldn't because my medical welfare was based here in the city, and so it meant I had to work quite hard to carve out a career doing things that I wanted to do, all the while feeling like I wanted to be in London, I wanted to be elsewhere. And I met so many people though that actually there was a resonance with. So I think York is starting to have a stronger population of people that are employed in other organisations. There's a stronger network of people that have businesses or are seizing opportunities. And therefore I don't necessarily see myself as just being part of the business community in York. I see myself as much as being part of the social community and the entrepreneurial community. I think it needs more role models to show that there are things that you can do, and whilst London is a very fast track to doing things, actually you can do some really pretty amazing things based in sort of a city that you feel resonates your social values in that way. But I started off having to wash dishes, and I have done every bit of my job inside and out, and I do think there's a general expectation of if you've been to one of the top universities, you should go into one of the top jobs, because it's he who has the most toys is going to be winning. And I left university with the expectation that you should go buy a house, you should be entitled to have a car, you should be entitled to a wage which is 20,000 plus, and actually I've employed a lot of very disillusioned graduates who have come back down to earth with a massive bump, whilst they have to go through a whole process of valuing and finding what it is that they value in life. And sometimes it's not money at all. And seeing them go through that process is really a challenge to see people go through that process.
Thank you. Well, we've got time for 3 more questions, so Andy, are you? Is that okay?
Gary Jones, York CVS. We've heard a lot about living wage, and York CVS is a member of the Living Wage Coalition in York, so we're very supportive of that. wonder whether there might be a similar way of focusing in on not just the lowest pay, but on the pay differential by making a bigger deal about pay ratios. I don't seem to hear as much about that as I think I could.
Okay, thank you. Got two at the front here, so you first.
I was wondering about if any of had comments on their racial inequality and how it's affecting growth as well.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Social capital, as I mentioned a few times, and certainly effective the banks are not interested in that. I just wonder how far is the possibility of the banks being encouraged to actually ask the businesses, apart from the money, what is their social capital that they are going to include in that, or to ask the question how they think their business is going to benefit local, national or international communities. Similarly, that can be even extended as far back as to when the students are in university to ask, why are you studying this? How it's going to benefit the local, national, international communities? What services are we going to provide for other than thinking that's going to benefit me and I'm going to get more toys?
Okay, thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Andrea Debbie. I'm from Unison York City branch. I'm speaking from a trade union perspective this morning. I've heard an awful lot of things that strike very much at the heart of the collective bargaining issue that trade unions were set up and the rights that we've won over the last 150 years. But I think my focus for this morning really is looking at there are things that councils, for example, are doing around social care. And my own group in particular is very strongly promoting amongst all the political leadership the Ethical Care Charter, which embodies things like the living wage. It embodies things like dignity in how we look after our most vulnerable people. And I think that that also is part of the dialogue moving forward. As you mentioned, we are going to be at a growing older population. There are more people over 65 than there are under 16. Yeah. And it's about sort of how we build in the things that trade unions have to offer, such as the Ethical Care Charter, into these conversations. We are a valuable resource, you're not using us well enough.
Okay, thank you. So there's 4 points there. Can I ask you to take one each? I'm going to give you carte blanche, so whichever of you goes first gets to choose and go down in order. Who's going first? Quickly.
I'll talk about pay ratio. Equality Trust, which we founded in 2009, campaigns directly around pay ratios and is asking all the parties to include that in their manifestos. You can do things like just asking that companies, or legislating that companies have to report those pay ratios. It becomes a bit of a name and shame game. There is a Canadian rule similar to fair trade with wage mark, which accredits companies that have a wage ratio of 8 or less. So top pay is as important because inequality matters as well as quality. So we do need to think about reductions in top pay. I'd love to address the racial inequality one as well, but if no one else does, I'll talk about it.
Go on, give it a really quick one and then we'll ask somebody else to.
In a sense, when we have great inequality in society, vertical inequality of incomes and wealth, it exacerbates all those horizontal inequalities of gender, disability, race, different religions, etc. And so it just makes all of those worse. So they're not separate problems, you know, but they are connected. But reducing inequality will help with all those other issues as well.
Okay, that's okay. Who else would like to give an answer to?
So the gentleman was asking about banks and things like that. One of the things that is become very aware is the rise of social entrepreneurialism and businesses that are being started with a greater social agenda. So there are the opportunities now for, with changes and challenges to the sort of agreed banking structure, there are more opportunities for individuals, for us to become investors into things and actually pick up responsibilities that the banks have laxed. I think that's more of a general kind of statement, the fact that we can't trust the banks to make the right decisions and that needs to be more fundamentally addressed by government and those deciding, sort of the International Monetary Foundation on that area. But there are things like Rebuilding Society, which is a leads-based social entrepreneurial bank that gives everybody the opportunity to fund socially aware businesses. So I think I'm more concerned with the fact that there are too many initiatives now entering the market to address the deficiencies that the banks have left behind. But there are changes that are starting to be established. But I think it will become a bit like Wonga in terms of what it does mean then to businesses moving forward.
Yes, can I just ask you to pick up the point of that?
Yeah.
And perhaps also read into that what you're doing about racial equality.
Sure. On the union front, I mean, unions have been campaigning for living wages for 250 years, and I've got some beautiful photos of marches with gorgeous tapestry living wage banners in the office. I think we work closely with all of the unions. What I would say is I think what's galvanised the recent living wage campaign is that it's brought in a broader coalition around the issue of wages, and in particular some faith communities. In London, the living wage campaign started off as a campaign around cleaning, subcontracted cleaning, where the workforce is largely immigrant and where unions had struggled to organise the workforce. But that workforce went to church, and we worked with the churches to organise the workforce, and then took the campaign to the employers where, like some of the employers in Canary Wharf, some of the banks where these things were working. And the power of that, I think, was bringing in both the unions and also sort of wider civil society. Unions had Unison had a really big win in the university sector just last week. The living wage, I think, is going to be the de facto minimum wage for all universities, which is tremendous. That'll affect thousands of workers. Just a note of caution, though, it doesn't include the subcontracted workforce. And I think, again, there's an example there where the civic voice can campaign for those non-unionised subcontracted cleaning workers within the HE sector, and hopefully we'll see living wage across the whole piece.
Yes, we're very well aware of the CJ workforce issues.
Oh, okay.
Could I just clarify, you said about the FTSE signing up, do they include their subcontractors?
Yeah, absolutely. They're not allowed to sign up unless they roll it out through their subcontracts.
Can I add that the Living Wage Commission reports in a couple of weeks? So there'll be a launch and a final report, I think on the 26th of June, and that of course has included the unions. Francis and Graham was a member of the commission.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. Sue, it's a really hard ask, but can you just respond to the kind of skills perspective of the question that was asked there about how we can ensure that both the learning institutions and the students are actually investing in the right skills for
now that's my kind of soapbox topic. So
well, you've got 30 seconds for your soapbox.
Yes, I mean, clearly the skills, the market for skills, including degrees, is now very much driven by the individual consumer or student. So, young people and older people can take out loans and choose the course that they want to do and follow it, and obviously they do. But then what we find at the end of that is some of the issues around needs are that there is definitely a mismatch between some of the choices that are made by individuals in a very aspirational way, then don't match up with what is actually there in the labour market. And some of the sectors that we have really strong presence of in our economy, like manufacturing, we have the biggest area of manufacturing in the country. We have 139,000 people employed in that sector. We have huge numbers in finance and legal and insurance, and many of this city here. So there are not enough people, particularly young people, who are choosing subjects that lead them towards engineering, computer software, coding, and some of the financial courses. If you had more of those, there would be a much stronger connection into work at the end. So I urge all schools particularly to do more to expose their young people to the realities of the job market around them.
Okay, thank you. We've run out of time. I've failed. It's gone 22. I'm really, really sorry, but I hope you've enjoyed that session. Please see this as the start of the conversation, and please also come and talk to Ben if you're interested in the complementary approach to taking things forward, and carry on the conversations over coffee lunch and the rest of the afternoon. Can we just thank the speakers for their contribution?